Okay, so now the payoff. We want to add markers to locations in the physical world to show up when we're pointing the camera in that direction. Now, again, this is WebAR. It's just the beginning. There's no occlusion, so if there's trees or buildings in the way or walls, you're still going to see these markers no matter where they are. Also, the placement is not super accurate, right? It's just not at that state yet. We're just playing with what could be possible in the future. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to actually make a marker. So we can go over into our cut and paste here and say, if you remember from A-Frame, we have to preload any kind of images. So this marker, I'm going to use a marker image. So I'm going to cut and paste this. And I'm going to go ahead and put that as the first thing in the scene before the camera to let it kind of just get those preloaded. Now, remember the way that this worked. So the A assets reps anything we want to preload. So we could preload 2 images if we wanted, right? We could, put 2 here. You may want to try it. Maybe get icons for restaurants that are different than icons for a dentist or something, right? Or whatever it is your intention. So remember, it has to have a unique identifier, right? An ID. So I just call this one marker because it's the only one I'm going to use, and that's fine. And then we have to put the source to where this image is. And the one I think you should be able to use this. I'm not sure. This will be attached to this to one of the glitches I made before. But if you wanted to find icons, what would you do? Well, maybe I'd go to a website like flaticon.com and I'd look for like a location marker, right? And find something that floated my fancy or I think would work with my design. Maybe I wanted to do a restaurant, so maybe I'll say a restaurant. Oh, we got an ad coming up, right? And maybe I'll find an appropriate, or it's a beer place, so we can find icons that we like to be their markers. Doesn't matter to me, right? So if you were doing that on your own, if you remember, you would go to assets, you would drag your asset up to here. So I already have the one I had on my desktop from before. I want to use it. I click on it, copy its where its path is, go back to here and replace this source with the source of the thing I just did, right? So easy peasy, we've got our markers for whatever we want to show as an indicator of the thing in the world. Just one more quick fix. I stopped the video. I added this to the image as well because this actually isn't getting served from the same path that ours is. And that's just a little matter of something. So that'll be fixed in the cut and paste code. So the very next thing we want to do is, whoops, and I have this here from moving on, is we're going to put our marker on a surface, right? So we need a plane using A-Frame. So if we go back to our code, you'll see I have this next part right here. And I'm going to cut and paste this right here. And this is where we're going to have to fix some things. So well, let's just look at what we're doing. So I'm building a plane, right? A plane is just a two-dimensional, right, width and height object. I put this class on it called location. That'll become important later, so I just did it now. I have this thing called look at GPS camera. And so this is important because if you remember the concept of billboarding, to have a 2D element always face the camera, face the viewer, so it always seems right, so we don't see like a thin view of it from somewhere. So how does this work? We actually have to cut and paste an extra thing. So on the text edit here, the very next thing is it right here. And it's going to go, I'm going to load it before we actually load ARJS. I don't know that it actually matters, but I'm just putting it in between those 2 other scripts we put up in the head before. And that will set that up. Going through what else is in this A-plane, we have the source. What texture are we using? And we're using this right here, right, marker. I set an initial width height of 5. This is going to take some testing to see how big it should be in based on distance and things like that. 5 seemed to be pretty good for a pretty close object, so I left it that way. Whoops, there's a problem here, right? GPS entity place. This is where you're going to have to fix something. So you're going to have to figure out, you're at your homes, who knows where you're at, where we're going to put these things, where in the world we want to put these things. So what you're going to want to do is go to a website like latlong.net and find your find the place, and obviously be really specific, right? Don't just, if you type just Iowa City, right, you're going to get what's the centroid of Iowa City. So you can actually put a full address here, right? And we'll just cut and paste the latitude to latitude, longitude, where the longitude is, right? So we'll put the latitude there, the longitude here. The last thing is position, and this is how high this thing shows. We're going to make 2. So basically, once you get your latitude and longitude changed, and how did this get to such a crazy latitude? Let me grab that real quick. I don't know what's going on here. Right there. Okay. So I'm going to cut and paste the second one of these. Now, through testing, I realized that if you have 2 things in one location, it will not work. So what I would recommend you do is just go and take one or 2 numbers off the rounding so that you have something slightly further. I think by taking 2 numbers off, you'll probably have a difference somewhere in the 50 to 100 meters. And let's change this position to show how that changes. So I know I'm in Iowa City. It's 230 meters or whatever above sea level, I think, or something like that. I don't know if that has a difference here. Maybe you can just randomly type some numbers here. But remember, we're making something higher by changing the y-axis, right? So x, we keep it at 0. Y, we move it up in the air. And z, we leave it at 0, right? Because the software, the JavaScript AR.js is going to figure out how big it should be based on its distance from the viewer. We just want to change then if it's higher up in the air, because maybe you're showing the Empire State Building or something, right? So that right there should give us 2 planes with markers that now if we stop and test it, we should see those things. Remember that when you go to test it, it can be finicky. I, for some reason, had to keep refreshing it, and it still wouldn't go. Finally, I kind of tapped on the screen. What it needs to do is it has to ask for camera permission, and at some point, it has to ask for the device orientation position, or it's not working. If you don't see, can I use device orientation, then you know it's not working. Try tapping your screen or something. That's what triggered it for me. So go ahead and try to see your markers. If they're too far right, you could try changing the latitudes and things like that.